So I wouldn't use the word alternative because punishment is out of my language altogether. It's not something that's useful for anything. So we don't need an alternative to something that doesn't work. Instead, we need to realize that people don't need to be shaped. So idea punishment is, what do I do to the child so they will get and be what I want them to be? But what I teach is not to try to make the child what you want them to be, but to nurture them to be what they want to be. So there is no need to shape them, coerce them, manipulate them, or make them do what I want to do. Of course, what parents say to me saying that is that then they would go wild and behave terrible. But the paradox is that when we punish, that's when they behave terrible, because they're suppressed and it causes a reaction of defiance. So if we push, they push back, and they're hurt, and their ability to learn and develop is harmed by it. So what I teach is not instead. What I teach is a relationship with the children that honors them. It's like watering the flower so it can grow, rather than prying the petals open and deciding which color they'll be or which direction the flower should grow. So it's a way of being with the children that allows the child to actually be the best of themselves. And the children, now I have 20 years experience and thousands of families and children. So there is no lack of evidence of how they turn out or what kind of children they are. So the report and what I see is that the children that grow up with that communication and understanding, and the parent is on their side always, behave the best. They don't have behavioral problems. They generally excel in whatever they do. They learn very well because they're not stressed out with anxiety. And their behavior is good not because they're afraid, not out of fear, not compliant behavior. They behave well because they want to, of their own free will. Because we are in a relationship with them that works for them, so they're content. And because they're content, they behave, they fit in, they just really want to cooperate with us because we cooperate with them. And I know that's a mouthful, and probably parents who are not used to it will immediately say that that's not possible. And that's why I want to stress that the evidence is already out there in probably millions of children, but personally that I know tens of thousands of them, and they are the exemplary behavior. In fact, one little anecdote from a recent email. I just got an email from Australia, from a client in Australia. I give sessions by Skype internationally or by phone. And this family, the mother is doing my way of parenting, but the father is always against it and doesn't want to hear of Naomi Aldort or all this teaching. And then they went somewhere in public, and the father wanted to prove to his wife that other children behave well too. So he pointed out to a family where the children were very content and peaceful and behaving well and looked happy and not oppressed. So they went over to that family, and they were Naomi Aldort followers. So the husband got on board last week. He said, okay, I got it. So yeah. The evidence is there, and it does work. And also the opposite evidence is there too. For hundreds of years we've been punishing and hurting children, thinking that if they're hurt they will behave better. And sometimes they do out of fear. The result is when they're older, they're emotionally scarred, tend to depression, suicide, aggression, or whatever, unable, dysfunctional emotionally, have more difficulties in learning. So we have seen the result of raising children by oppressing them, controlling them, punishing them. And it's the wars in the world. It's an inner war. We have a war against the child, and then we have a rooster calling in the middle of the sentence. Yes. It's not about intervention or neglect. The kind of parenting I teach is as far from neglect as possible. It's very involved rather than intervening. So involved as in having an intimate, close, caring relationship and connection with the child, but not shaping who they are. So it's just a different concept. You can be with a person like you are with an adult. You don't tell them what to do. You don't tell them, say please and thank you, another adult. That doesn't mean you're neglecting them. You're being with them, but you're not as rude as to tell them what to say. And you trust them, you nurture what they need, and you follow their direction by providing as the development requires. And then eventually they develop that sense of gratitude authentically and learn from us, from how we treat them, to use certain words in certain circumstances, and then it's real rather than phony or under fear or not used at all because I hated when my mother told me to, so now I don't want to, or I do it because I'm still a good boy or a good girl, but I'm really scared inside and anxious, so emotional issues. So if we want the child to develop real manners, like the rooster doing when he needs to do it, real manners rather than obedience and because he's afraid that somebody's expecting him to do. We all suffer from this, what are they expecting of me? That's the nature of insecurity, being constantly on the guard, what am I supposed to do? But the way I teach to raise children is to actually be very close to them and respectful of them in a way that they get a sense that the inside voice of themselves is something they can follow. I'm not talking about capricious wants or addictions. I'm talking about the real deep philosophical inner spirit that we all are. And that is a powerful and good source from which to make your life. When you live with people and you learn from them gradually to also care for others because you're being cared. And when you are ready. So I don't know if I answered exactly that, because intervention is definitely not the kind of word that I use very often. Trust yourself and trust your child, because the whole culture and your doctor and your grandma and your mother-in-law and your everybody is going to tell you to not trust your child. Do this to them and make them this, or they'll be a wild lion instead of a person. You know, we're constantly being told that somehow if we don't constantly put our claws on the child and shape them and control them, that somehow they won't turn out. But the beautiful thing with my encounter with parents, especially mainstream parents who have been controlling their children for years, is that when they actually study with me, and it doesn't take, it's not enough to just read the book or have one interview or lecture, but people who really put their heart into learning, into growing themselves, into freeing themselves from all the brainwash that we all grew up with and the fear-based idea about children, they are, and then they become trusting of themselves. They always say, that's how I always felt inside. This feels right. This is peaceful. All of a sudden there is a big relief. And all of a sudden there is, not all of a sudden, but gradually, the relationship with the children is peaceful, the children behave better, and it hits the chord of their authentic being. In other words, all this other stuff is not really who we are. So every parent, no matter how punitive and old-fashioned, when they encounter this teaching, if they put themselves into it fully, not if they encounter it and say, no, I can't do it, which for some parents, yeah, they can't yet, that's fine. But if they put themselves into it and question the old thinking about controlling children, then I would say they have a great relief, and the trust is the main thing, like trust that inner voice. But it's not intuition, because you can say, I trust myself, so intuitively I feel like hitting my child. That's the voice of the mind as a result of what was done to you as a child. So when I talk about trust the self, I'm talking about doing quite a lot of work on yourself to get to that place where you are free to really listen and to really see your child and then trust the child. that where they are is perfect. You don't have to turn them into something else. Everything that I teach. How many hours do we have? So truly, I've learned so much, and I'm still learning. I mean, my sons are still showing me where I made mistakes, and like everybody else, I made plenty of them. In fact, what I teach now is much better than what I did, because I learned from other families, children, and my own children as they grow up and give me the 20 years feedback thing. You know, here is what we did, and oh, I didn't realize that, and I didn't realize that. So, but in terms of specifically homeschooling, my conviction is only stronger. They're all three are top students in universities. Two of them graduated. One is going to graduate school next in the fall. One has one more year in the best school of music in the world, which accepts very few people, and for full scholarship. And is again top student. In fact, I wish he wasn't so top student, because one of my mistakes with him is not noticing, even though I teach so much, to not praise and not get people into expectations, that he, because of his classical musical path, where other teachers, and you know, I guess I got kind of hooked into how talented he is, that he doesn't have a lot of tolerance for getting less than the top grade. He really wants to get that, and I, till this very day, I tell him, get some B's, you know, don't get such good grades. But it's not easy for him that way. So I've learned that. But also, I would say that if anything, if I did it again in terms of what I learned, I would be even more of what I did, even more trusting of the children, even more loose in the way that, yeah, they could do whatever they want, and yet protecting them from influences that could impede that freedom.